Welcome to Fasken's first session of our part 2 of our PDAC seminar series. Today's session is looking for an effective corporate board, focus on diversity. My name is Michael Barassa. I'm a partner with the Toronto office of Fasken Martineau. I'm part of the Global Mining Group. I just want to let everybody know that we've got 3 other sessions coming up. One of them is on Monday, June 6th. Then on the 14th and one on the 15th. And the one on the 15th will actually be in our office. So some people may want to attend in person and the others are going to be virtual. And that one actually will be a hybrid session. All of these sessions are available if you just go to our website and you look for Fasken Institute. I just want to remind everybody to look at your screen. There's some details there about some important information from our marketing group and what to do for today's session. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Virginia Schweitzer. She's my colleague. She's the co-managing partner in our Ottawa office. She will be moderating today's session, and she's going to introduce today's panel. So Virginia, over to you.
Thanks so very much, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. I am pleased to be the moderator for this panel to discuss effective board governance, focus on diversity and inclusion. We have amazing panel members today, and I'm going to actually introduce them and then ask them to speak about themselves so you can hear in their own words what they're interested in and their areas of focus. And so I'm going to start with Rosario Astuvilca-Rojas, who's the CEO and founder of Inclusive Mining, PDAC board member and co-founder of HispanoMine. Rosario, I'll let you take it away and then I'll come back and introduce the others.
Thank you so much, Virginia, and thank you, Fasken, for the invitation to participate in this very important discussion. Just something about me. I've been in the mining sector my whole life. I am from LaRose, Peru. It's a smelter town in the central part of Peru. That's where I grew up. My father worked in industry. My grandfather also worked in industry. So I grew up at different mine sites. And then when I finished school, I moved to Lima and I studied law. I'm a lawyer in Peru, and then moved to Toronto for a 6-month program initially. And I'm here 21 years later, still in Toronto. I fell in love with the country. I came in the summertime. So, and I switched my career here to human resources. So I've been working in HR, initially with Falconbridge, and then in executive search, helping, different clients, finding talent, executives, and also board directors for companies. And also part of my experience, Virginia, it's been, as you mentioned, co-founding HispanoMine 10 years ago to provide an opportunity for the Hispanos and Hispanics in mining to connect and to empower Hispanics in this sector, which, as you can understand, Latin America, it's a very important region for Canadian miners. So for me, it was very logical to start and help and promote and advocate for this group as well. And over the years, I've been supporting different groups, including Women in Mining, particularly the ones in operations, which they have different, as we know, different challenges. And also recently involved in a couple of initiatives assisting and helping Latinas executives across sectors and also women of color, advancing women of color for boards as well. So quite a number of years working in this area of diversity and inclusion. And as you mentioned as well, last year I was elected to the board of PDAC. I'm currently on the Committee of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and also the Indigenous Affairs Committee. And just recently started this new venture, Inclusive Mining, with my goal to help and assist the industry to become more diverse and inclusive as well. And I just want to finish with these words, Nyohaji Mai Kuyanki. This is from my ancestors, Quechuas from Peru. It's an honor to be here, Virginia.
Thank you so much, Rosario. What a wonderful introduction to who you are and your involvement in the mining sector and in so many areas. I'll turn it over to Brenda LaRose, founder and executive coach, BL Talent Solutions Limited, to tell us a little bit about herself. Brenda?
Great. Thank you, Virginia, and thank you, Michael and Faskens, for the invitation. Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda LaRose, of course. I'm an Indigenous woman originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Métis, and I have lived and worked across Canada. About 20, and I'm a chartered professional in HR. About 25 years ago, I founded an executive search firm that became national, and I actually sold it to Leaders International about 5-6 years ago. And today is my last day where I just finished. I got the email and I placed my last board member, a diverse candidate on a board in Toronto. So it's a transition.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I've transitioned into executive coaching and specialize in, especially when someone's starting a new role, a leader or CEO, and making sure that they transition and onboard very successfully. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brenda. Wonderful to hear your background as well. And now I will turn it over to Priya Patil, B.Sc, J.D, ICD, and corporate director. lots of letters after your name, Priya.
Yes. Thank you. I'm pleased to be a part of this event, and pleased to share my insights and experiences with my co-panelists. I am on 2 boards right now, 2 mining boards actually. One is a copper mining company in Newfoundland actually, and listed on the AIM of the London Stock Exchange. The other one is a gold exploration company in Red Lake area, listed in Toronto. My background is I am a lawyer by training, American and Canadian. And I used to work for first of all, I'm from India, educated in computer sciences, coming to Canada about 30 years ago. And, during the first super cycle in early 2000, I was hired by Breakwater Resources, which was listed on NYSE and TSX, and multi-jurisdictional, multi-mine company. So I was the chief legal officer there. And that was my first foray into mining. It was a producing mine, and I learned a lot and I was corporate secretary. So I was sitting with really seasoned directors and learning about some of the important issues facing the mining industry. And as well, I was the right-hand person of the CEO. After that, I moved into investment banking. I was head of investment banking and managing director at Lowen Ondaatje McKitchen. And afterwards, I was managing director and founding partner for the Eastern expansion of PI Financial Corp. I took a couple of years of a break for some family reason, and then I worked with the Toronto Stock Exchange as their head of diversified industries, which included financial services, real estate, and manufacturing. I have been on boards since 2002, but primarily at that time on not-for-profit boards. However, I was fairly focused on what interested me, and that was necessarily economic development, education, entrepreneurship. So I selected that type of boards, and I enjoyed that quite a lot. In 2016, I started my journey towards public company boards, and I was on the board of a gold exploration company in the Cadillac Break area. And that company was acquired by a spin out of Osisco. And now I'm on these 2 boards, and I have some other couple of things in the pipeline. One of them, I've been nominated for an IPO board. We are in a quiet period, so I cannot tell you the name. And I really look forward to sharing some of my insights and a lot of positive experiences as well. So thank you for inviting me, Fasken.
Thanks so much, Priya. Just to say, we have such an accomplished group of panelists. I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then we're going to do some questions and answers and have all of our panelists put in their thoughts on various discussion points that we've decided on. So having an effective board of a corporation benefits all the shareholders, all the stakeholders rather of the corporation, the employees and management internally, the business and the growth of the business and the external facing business, and of course the shareholders and potential investors. Statistically, we have seen that board diversity goes hand in hand with improved effectiveness. Diversity has many facets, as we've seen from our introductions here today, many of which are represented by our panelists. Gender, persons of color, Indigenous, racialized, immigrants. Diversity provides unique perspectives and leads to innovation. And we have seen positive trends in recent years showing increased diversity on, in particular, public company corporate boards. We see in the 40 to 50% range where approximately 25 to 30% of boards have women, and in many cases, greater than 30%. The trend, and this positive trend, is continuing. However, participation from other diverse groups is at rates that are below this, and we are looking to see if those rates can be improved, particularly as it relates to visible minorities, Aboriginal peoples, and peoples with disabilities. And so our discussion today is going to be about diversity and inclusion on boards. We have Rosario and Brenda and Priya, who can give both the benefit of their knowledge of being in the industry for a long time, their participation on boards, personal experiences, or putting people on boards. And so we'll get right to it and start our questions. Given all of your diverse backgrounds and wealth of experience on boards, can you speak to some of the practical benefits of diversity on boards and what you've seen or how your knowledge of that? And Priya, we're going to start this question with you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate all of the participants who have taken interest in this very important industry, and it's going to become more important with the Green Revolution. So my compliments to all of them, and my compliments to Fasken for organizing this. When I look at diversity on boards, I see two facets to it. One is a very practical consideration, and the other one is more social consideration. And because I come from capital markets area, I'm going to focus on capital. Mining industry as such is a very capital intensive industry. And you want to attract good capital to the company. So I'm going to leave that thought and then I'm going to move on to what I have to say. When you have diverse board members, they bring a variety of perspectives. And those perspectives may be something that the company has never thought about, but has become, maybe wasn't relevant 15 years ago, but has become relevant now. So as a result, your risk lens, your lens of adding value to the company is more focused and sharpened with all these perspectives. When you look at a diverse board, it's really at the top of the company food chain. And when you have diverse board, you're sending a message all the way to the entry level that this company is diverse and inclusive. Now, what happens when people see that their board is diverse? Senior management, middle level, juniors, they all feel energized with that. And that brings out the best in people in decision making. The kind of strategic decisions being made at the lowest level to the highest level are much better when you have diverse board. Once you have better quality of decision, that reflects in company performance. And company performance is performing well when it is. Capital markets pay attention to that. And when they pay attention to that, investors pay attention to that. Now, investors, mind you, I started with investors' capital. So when investors are paying attention to a company, they also have one of the increasingly important criterion of ESG. And among the ESG three letters, the most visible and the most easily ascertainable aspect is board diversity. You go present to investors, they look at the board, and then immediately, there's some assumptions made about company's culture. So that's very, very, very visible. So you've got to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and sending the right message to the quality investors. And once they see that, they put two and two together, saying that the decision-making in this company is better, hence the performance is better, and they're more optimistic about you, and they're more interested in supporting the company. So all of that comes back, it goes around, comes back to capital. You have better board diversity, you have better access to capital. So that's the practical aspect of it. The social aspect of that is more regulatory and stuff. So we don't have, mandated board composition requirements, but we do have comply or explain. And also, just socially, when people look around, you have a social license. You're a mining company. It's not a technology, whatever. You are operating on a land. And so as a result, the kind of messaging you send to the society in general, to the regulators, when you go for your permits and stuff, the regulators are going to look at who you are. And they're going to look at how you handle risk. And a diverse board can handle risk much better than a non-diverse board. So those are the two very important aspects, and they're all encompassing for mining companies, at least.
Thank you so much, Priya, for that insight and those thoughts. Brenda, I was going to ask you if you wanted to jump in and talk about actually placing members on boards or that talent search side of things and the practical benefits of diversity.
Well, I would just first of all say that Priya really hit the nail on the head there. Like, she answered it perfectly from my standpoint, made some of the points that I would, and that we know that diverse boards actually corporations perform much better financially. Okay, so that's really the bottom line. The other thing is, she was totally right about you really need people at the top, at the board level, and in your executive team. We're in a shortage of talent. I know that every single one of the mining companies that are on this call today are struggling with talent, in even entry-level jobs and mid-range skilled level, like for sure, that's going to be huge. But those people coming in, entry level and even mid-range, if they don't see diverse people on the executive team of the corporation and at the board level, they look there and they go, well, there's really no career path for me here. So they're there, but they're probably, going to be looking for other opportunities as well. So it's a big message. So I just want to end with that, because Priya really made a good case for it all, really.
Rosario, would you like to jump in and add anything?
Yeah, just definitely agree with Priya's comments and Brenda's in regards to the benefits and the importance of diversity on boards. I just wanted to add something very logical in terms of the problem we have if we don't have diversity. We have groupthink, right? And I'm sure many of us understand what groupthink is a problem. So having groupthink, right? And even if you have a different skill sets like on the board, but definitely, but the same perspectives, meaning the same upbringings, the same type of groups, you are missing out. You just don't know what you don't know. And that's a big risk. I think Priya was referring to that sort of risk when you have on the board. So definitely this is a business issue. To have the diversity is just good governance, if you think about it, right? And especially what Brenda mentioned as well, the attraction piece to people now looking at their representation on boards and executives is so important for the attraction of new, people into the companies. Now everyone looks for that. If you don't look at somebody that looks like you will think, do I need a career here? Can I have a future here? Maybe not, right? and you go and move into some other organization. So that is a very important aspect we need to think about. Just that.
Thank you so much, Rosario. And I guess you've seen that in particular with your work with Hispanic groups and HispanoMine, bringing forth that talent group to boards and to executives and to mining companies.
Yeah, this is true, Virginia. Just to share something, when I started my career looking at different and helping mining companies with exploration on projects in Latin America, it was interesting to see those boards not having one person who have had that exposure to that country and trying to build a mine there. So it was sort of something logical to us, how much you know the culture, how much you know about the country. And now I'm glad that we see in that trend that you mentioned, Virginia, with our opening and actually discussing about the importance of having that perspective. And in particularly with the Hispanic community in Latin America, such an important region for Canadian miners, it's very logical to have that perspective on the table, right?
Right, absolutely. And as you say, so important in Canadian mining, and we have so many Canadian companies that are, well, all over the world, but particularly in Latin America as well. So
also just talking of that, just can I add something quickly?
Absolutely.
See, the mining industry is in transition, right? I mean, there are so many forces, positive as well as, some challenges coming in that direction. But, you cannot have, I mentioned green revolution, for example. You cannot have green revolution without mining. So that's a great opportunity. But the other side of that also is that requires newer skill sets. The awareness of how do you transition from traditional mining to more acceptable mining methods? Yeah. How do you use technology, for example, to decrease the impact on the environment, for example? So that's a very different skill set. So you require people from very different educational background and experience background nowadays than you did 15 years ago or before. So you have to be mindful of that. You need to attract that talent of a new caliber now, and new industries and new ways of thinking.
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the perceptions that continues to exist is that there are no qualified individuals who also bring diversity to the board. Has that been your experience? And Rosario, I think maybe you were going to start that off.
Yes, Virginia, that's such a great question, because I hear it many times, sometimes from clients saying we couldn't find diverse, the board ready candidates for my board, or we tried and we couldn't. So yeah, many times we have those comments. And I think what I like to do here is separate the comment before about the talent issue in general that we have and the talent for boards. Because for boards, we're not looking for a large quantity. We're looking for special skills, a special, perspective, and very few seats for a reason, right? The board is a small number of people we need at the board, and I think what I think the challenge is in many cases is first of all to have the intentionality from the board and the chair of the board to really make this happen and to really work in finding this person. And the other is to have the right partner to make it happen and to help you tap into the networks you don't know about, right? Because if you go back to your traditional ways of finding a new director, meaning tapping into your own network or the people you know, and you're not getting the results, means you're not tapping into the networks of other diverse groups that you might not know about. That's where you need the help, right? And that's why, for instance, search firms can help you with that, or not, depending on their own networks. And I have an example to tell you. I have a good friend who's the chair of a board. And I remember she very intentional on this idea of making the board diverse, hire a search firm they couldn't deliver. They just mentioned to her, we couldn't find a diverse director for this board. Well, what she did, she just accepted and then she moved on. No, she fired them and find some other search firm to help her. And they did a great job. They find the qualified board candidates that she wanted, and she made that happen. So I think it's the intentionality that you really think this is important. So this is a strategic, this is a business, reason that you're working on this. And think about also about the requirements that Priya was thinking about, mentioning that before maybe we have different needs. Now you have to adjust that mentality on today and say, what exactly are you looking, and what is important and what is not important sometimes for the boards, right? You need to question yourself as well and be intentional about this effort.
Thanks so much, Rosario. Maybe Brenda, do you have something you'd like to add on that front?
Sure. I think, again, Rosario really hit the nail on the head. I'm not in search anymore as of today, so I would do exactly, what she said she knew the woman did, as get a new executive search firm. I mean, we have qualified people that are really, potentially great board members that are just not in your board's network, probably. Even a decade ago, there weren't that many women at the board table, here in Canada. And was that because there were no qualified women? No, it was just that they were not being identified and recruited to join boards at that time. And the same is for racialized and Indigenous professionals. We as Indigenous professionals, we're playing catch up. Until 1960, we weren't considered people and we didn't have the right to vote. It was against the law to hire a lawyer. It was against the law to hire an accountant and, try and be successful, in business without being able to hire a lawyer or an accountant. I'm sure people can relate to that, how difficult that would have been. And if you had a post-secondary degree, you would lose any limited, Indigenous rights that you had. So my mother-in-law, who is First Nations, went to university and just didn't take her last course, so she wouldn't lose her limited rights. So we are playing catch up, but they're out there. And many of the people that are racialized and Indigenous have a better quality of education than the rest of the people. And perfect example is Priya and Rosario. I mean, numerous, degrees and qualifications above and beyond. I mean, it's just, we have really good people. We truly do diverse candidates for boards. Yep.
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
I think, so Rosario and Brenda said, absolutely the right thing about the networks. But if you step back a little bit, when actually a company has intention to hire a diverse candidate, and they come up with the skills matrix, that, these things, whatever that they need, I think that's where sometimes the issue might be, in the sense that if you're a mining company and you're saying, I want a geologist who has built mines and all the technical things, because mining is a very technically focused industry. And, their go-to is usually focus on the technical aspects of the mining industry. And I understand it's business. I understand that. However, once you are, beyond exploration stage, a lot of other skills are necessary in order to build a mine, okay? And there are a lot more risks associated with, mine. Like you want project finance, and they're looking at the composition of the senior leadership, the boards and such, and they're saying, is this company I want to lend $600 million to? And they're looking at not necessarily just the skill set, because, you've already found the deposit, you've proven it. And now it's a question of building the mine. So all of a sudden, you have a different type of skill sets coming into play. And one aspect of that is, say, capital, there is legal, regulatory, there is human resources, finding the right people, and there's risk. and technology as well is coming into play. So I think the way it's designed, the board search, the qualifications that companies seek, that's what they need to look at very carefully. And I understand mining is a very unique type of industry. I don't think there's any other industry which so many steps, right from green, like brownfield to exploration, to proving up the resource and development stage, and then small mining producing, intermediate giants, and people who are looking to merge and stuff. So there is a very distinct life cycle and distinct requirements along the way. So, companies just need to look at internally what are they seeking, and in the end, they have to look at their own requirements as well. But they have to look at what do they seek, and that is important simply because there aren't a lot of women in senior leadership roles in mining. So if you're saying I want a mining chief operating officer who has served as chief operating officer, you're going to get 0 people because there aren't women in those roles. So not only it becomes important to look at your, qualities you seek, but also becomes important to look at your own leadership pipeline. Are you promoting women who are going to be board ready if you look for technical skill set? I think that's important. And that's where, HR aspects, the placement and, executive recruiters, that comes into play. It's a long-winded answer, sorry.
No, thank you to all of you. Different perspectives again on the same topic, and it struck me as everybody was speaking about reaching beyond your own network, and I was thinking that as you reach beyond your own network, even just in business, in law, and whatever you're doing, it expands your horizons. Again, you're seeing other people's perspective, and you're increasing your contact and business flow. And that can always be a good thing for any business, and certainly in the mining business. As you go beyond your immediate network, it opens up a whole new world for you, and the diversity on your board just helps to increase that. So again, back to what we said at the beginning about innovation and about being good for all your stakeholders. If you are increasing your reach of your business and bringing in those talented people, you can only be helping your business. And each one of you talked about that in different ways. And then Priya, you were talking a little bit more about what's in your leadership pipeline. So building both internally and externally. And I wondered if Brenda or Rosario, you wanted to comment on that, because I think it's such an important point that maybe it bears some additional comment.
Okay, I'll jump in there. I think a lot of boards are looking at their executive, leadership team to actually do succession planning, to assess, who's, at the, just below the executive level that's potential for executive, identify, any gaps that they have, do training and development, and, high potential people to keep them in the organization. And they're doing, I'm seeing the, performance pay tied to this. So, there's incentives to do that. And I always like to give a good example of in the early 1990s, I was living and working in the Oakville area. And at the time, RBC started it in the banking sector. There weren't a lot of women in management, even mid-management roles in banking. And, even branch managers, there just weren't a lot. So they tied it to their performance, to actually promoting women. And there were a lot of women promoted over a 3-year period because it was a certain percentage of their performance pay. Some made it, most made it, a few didn't. They were given some support. And then the rest of the banks followed suit, of the big banks. And that was the big, increase. So you're going to see that more and more, where the board is holding the executive, the CEO, the C-suite accountable for succession planning internally.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, Virginia, a comment as well in terms of you're looking to add diversity in your board, but you're also providing your own executives to sit on other boards and have that exposure, right? I mean, you cannot just talk about it, and when your executive comes in and say, "Can I, join the, potentially," and say no, you have, you're also developing the people for, in general. So I think that's a good message when you actually believe this is important, and when individual on your organization and executive is asking for this opportunity, of course, not having any conflicts, of course. They should be allowed. They should be allowed to, and that helps the organization and helps the executive for sure. So,
thanks very much. Why don't we move on to a different question, which kind of ties a little bit in, particularly, Brenda, with what you were talking about with the banks. But should companies have targets to increase diversity on the board? I know this can be a very controversial topic. And if not targets, what are some of the strategies that a board or organization can take to improve diversity initiatives? Who would like to be the first one to jump in on this?
I can talk about it, Virginia.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if I like the word targets, but definitely I think if you want your diversity and inclusion to work, there has to be some sort of a metric. I mean, the number that you are your goals, to have ideally, and the organization, and nothing that has to be fixed, but definitely something like an aspirational goal that you're trying to get there. Because how are you going to measure then your progress or not in certain areas? If in general you think about diversity, and also something that Brenda mentioned is the accountability part as well. So what is going to happen if we reach or not our goals, right? So I look at this as a business issue in terms of the organizations putting some metrics and accountability, so we can make this happen like any other business issue we have in the organization. So I will definitely be in favor of having that. And each organization are at a different stage. So it will depend as well how advanced you are in this journey. Because think about this diversity and inclusion as a journey. This is not something that it can be fixed quickly or somebody have the magic answers to this. This is a journey depending on where you are, what your team looks like right now, what the stage of the corporation is. So you have to ask those questions and put a plan that works for you as well, right? So that would be just my comment about that.
I just have, may I?
Absolutely, Priya. Yeah.
Okay. I just have a little, like a different view on that. A lot of the headlines have screamed, minors lag on diversity on board and leadership. Those have been the headlines for a long time. But the facts now are pointing in a different direction, in the sense that I was just reading a report, and 2015 has been a pivotal year for the change. That's when the regulators said comply or explain. And mining industry is a very, regardless of the, what we might think, it's a very resilient industry. It is an opportunity industry, and they have seen the opportunity to make a change. We all know it's been, male-dominated industry for various reasons, but they understand that they need to change. The mining industry understands they need to change. So when I was looking at the stats, I was pretty happy to read that. So since 2015 to 2021, the mining industry has had the board representation increase from 7% to 19%, which is it's almost 3 times, in the 6 years. But when you look at the universe of public companies generally, they only went from 10% to 23%. So I think if you look at just the numbers, I think mining industry has done a better job of trying to include more women on their boards, and as a result, sending the message downwards. Now, not just the mining industry, every industry needs to actually do a better job of including the indigenous peoples and racialized people. Those stats are not very complimentary. I'm not your typical example. I'm one of the rare examples of, somebody who's, racialized is still on the boards. Indigenous people, 5% of the population and very low representation, and racialized people, 22% of the population and very, very unflattering numbers. But that's a different issue already. Right now we're talking about women. I think the mining industry is doing a better job, and it's going to continue to do a better job because they look at opportunity, they look at what they have to lose if they don't do it. And that's where my point of view is.
So Priya, let me ask you, if we're saying that about, the improvement for women that we've seen over the last number of years, how do we translate that into people of color, indigenous? Brenda, I might come over to you on that. How do we improve the numbers from that perspective? Not just within the mining industry. Obviously, we're focused on that today here, but how might we improve those numbers? And I'm sure if you have all the right answers, you'll be a big hit. Everybody will be contacting you because I know it's a difficult question. But I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Okay, thanks, Virginia. Okay, first of all, I don't think boards should be legislated or mandated, for diversity. But I clearly think they need goals and objectives for diversity on their boards, especially if they don't have any diversity on their boards. You got to look at diversity just like you would skills and competencies for your board. You certainly wouldn't have a board that have all lawyers, on your board. You wouldn't, or all accountants on your board, because you're missing things. And, both Rosario and Priya both talked about, when you're in a certain geographic market, you need the people that can actually advise you. And, one of the sad stories was reading about, for me, it was Rio Tinto. And I was actually quoted in an article in the Globe, when that happened. And I just said, if they would have had someone on the board, from, that was indigenous, that understood the significance of the region, that probably wouldn't happen, and the CEO would have his job today.
Yeah, they do have now someone, but after the fact. Yes, you're right. Good point. Sorry.
So, Korn Ferry came out with a recent study, and they said in order to have diversity, women, racialized, indigenous, a good mix, in your organization, board and executive team, I'm talking both, you need at least 3, individuals. That they just came out last year with that study, which I thought was really good. There's a gentleman that was managing partner for Canada, Korn Ferry, Elan Pratzer, and he's just come out with a software called P3 that actually tests in scenarios for board and executive roles, if it wants to give more reassurance to, to the boards or, executives. For racialized people, they do scenario testing on software that's non-biased, and it's brand new. I was part of the beta project for that on the testing, and so that's one of the areas. I mean, there's software and AI coming out for assessments on that, but I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to let it go. I'll put it back to you, Virginia.
Thanks so much, Brenda. It's obviously it's a complex topic, and as we know, as we've seen, but I think that where maybe there was sort of putting your head in the sand or not dealing with the issues previously, I think on the positive side of things, now there is a real engagement and an interest in dealing with the issues and thinking about how do we move forward and what does the future look like, even if everybody's not there today. Sometimes it's still a thought process, and people are still moving forward, and that's okay. And then there are others who are taking great strides. So I think that those leaders help others to see what direction they can go as well. So this is a question, and it ties into a lot of the things that we've already been talking about, but particularly in boards taking the lead and having larger diversity on their boards. Are boards uncomfortable speaking about diversity? Is discomfort a good motivator? Does that help people to get into a mode where they think about this in more depth? And how do we make diversity a priority issue for boards? Priya, I think that maybe you're going to jump in on this one.
Okay, I think generally boards are aware and they're looking to leaders. Like, as I said earlier, there is a whole spectrum of different stages of mining. Like, I'm just going to focus on this industry because that's what we're talking about. Whole spectrum of mining companies. A lot of the companies at the initial side of that is looking to its leaders, the techs and the Comicos of the world and the Barricks of the world to take the lead. And what is encouraging is that they are actually taking the lead. They're put into place fairly good frameworks around this issue. And, that frameworks involves the kind of search they do, very thoughtful search they do. And once you bring people in, you've got to put people on board in order for them to succeed, not to fail. So there is a lot of thought that has to go into it. They're also looking at their own leadership as well, and that goes with it. Anytime you cannot talk about board search without leadership, really. They are interconnected. So they are doing that. So companies are looking to the leaders, they're taking the lead from that. But more importantly, because we have had such a long and great history with the mining industry, we've got very strong institutions. We've got PDAC, we've got Women in Mining, who actually play a very important role, not only in advocating, but also guiding companies. I was on PDAC's website the other day, and they have a handbook for companies how to deal with the issue of, putting more diverse candidates on the board and what to do. It's a fairly comprehensive handbook. So there is that kind of infrastructure, the leaders taking steps. So I don't think the boards are that reluctant to talk about this issue. They probably are trying to handle this head on, but it goes back to, again, the networks they have, right? And the kind of ask list that they put together, right? That's where a lot of times the issue, actually fails. And I think through these kind of panel discussions, because, I'm sure there are a lot of advisors in the room who are listening to this, who advise companies and boards. And, they also probably provide that kind of, help to companies. So I think there is a great awareness of it. Nobody's trying to avoid the issue. They're just trying to find the right people for where they are at. And sometimes they are, at a lot of opportunities, like where do I find this kind of person, And in that case, you got, executive recruiters, board recruiters come into play. So I don't think there is a lot of either resistance or ignorance about this issue. you cannot ignore it anymore.
Yeah, if I can just add something there, Virginia. You're right, Priya. I think when I started doing my first board search 10 years ago, there was no mention of diversity. I remember it was not something we were discussing with the client that specifically focused on, not even gender diversity to that matter. However, we have evolved. We have advanced over the years. And yeah, women on boards is something we see more often, definitely something that I guess in every discussion when you're helping a board, to find candidates, it's something that everyone talks about. It's no longer the conversation we avoid. I think if you think about being uncomfortable, maybe it's on the matter of how do I start doing this properly, or especially if you move from gender diversity to race diversity, maybe to race or to indigenous people, something that I'm seeing also good trend now, having more indigenous on boards, but it's still new, right? In comparison to gender diversity. So I think there's still a lot of questions out there, or how do we do this and where do we go? And I think that's what's going on right now in the discussions. Like they are definitely saying and understanding that it's an important matter. It's just how do we move from the just gender diversity piece to other diversity on the board. That would be what I think is what I'm seeing on some of the discussion.
Rosario, just while you're talking about that, a question had come in about the percentage of Latina women on boards. It's a whole lot. The question is, it's a lot lower than women on boards generally. And somebody had said it's like 1%, but I'm not sure whether that's a right number or not. But I just wondered if that's in fact the case.
It is pretty low, definitely, Virginia. If you think about in general women of color, and then you have a set, of different races, and looking at the Latina group is even, minimal. And the only thing I have to tell you is this is a big comparison to the US, where the Latino population is quite significant. Then there we have over 60 million of Latinos right now. So it's quite large, and it's still there in the US. We don't see the number of Latinos sitting on boards that we should, if you think about the demographics in terms of representation, that you probably should see on board. So it's quite a challenge. That's what we started recently, the conversation about the Latino community. And as I said, a very important region for mining companies to explore and do projects and build mines. But in general, for the Latino community to be represented on boards. When I was elected, I had so many calls and so many conversations with different Latino leaders trying to understand why don't we see more of this, representation. And I think it's a matter of, first of all, if you see more Latinos, you are more interested in going that path for sure. But also it's having these conversations about, if the company is involved in Latin America, who on the board is actually bringing that perspective? And if we don't have anyone, what are we doing to find that person and to add to the board, right?
And maybe that leads into a question for all three of you on how do you get involved on a board? Obviously, all of you have been involved, whether it's on the search side or on boards, sitting on boards. How do people who might be watching today or who are interested, how do we get people involved on boards? Brenda, do you want to start? Yeah.
Well, yeah, good question, and it starts when you're a little bit younger. You really have to usually do your due diligence and serve on other boards. If you're not at the C-suite, or at the executive table, earning that. So, it starts with, volunteer boards, not-for-profits, crown corporations, different advisory groups. So you get your stripes that way. And then it's, eventually a transition,
That's correct. I think you got to start early and, be on some not-for-profit boards, because the whole discussion about being on board, it's not just about being on board. There are responsibilities to a lot of stakeholders. And you probably should not, if you're wise, even get on a board if you don't understand what they are. So it's not, it's not the land of milk and honey, So the point is, start sitting on not-for-profit boards, understand how, board duties are, who are you responsible to, how to avoid conflicts, how to set like a strategic direction for that organization. No matter how small that organization is, it's, you're learning as you go. And afterwards, you also, you're working somewhere, you have a career, just look at, your own skill sets. In other words, are those skill sets useful for what kind of board are they useful for example, right? And, so if I'm like really a tech heavy person and all that I know is about cybersecurity in a very like machine level language, I probably may not be all that suitable for a mining board because I'm very technically focused and different kind of technical. Mining requires technically focused people, but that's a different kettle of fish. And this is different. So you got to look at your own skill set as well. And in the end, when you actually are considering sitting on some boards, do you have any transferable skills, right? For example, I'm a lawyer and investment banker. So capital markets, I look at my own skill set and I know no matter which industry I go in, they're transferable skills. So, but I choose mining, which is the biggest industry. I have worked, advised mining companies. I've done financings for them. I work for a mining company. So I sort of gravitated towards that industry. But I do have transferable skills. So I think when you are early in your career, you've got to develop skills which could be transferable. Okay, I'm not saying go to law school or anything, but the point is, whatever they are, they could be simply environmental transition. They could be how to, it's a new technology in the mining industry or water conservation or whatever it is. Look into it. What interests you? And once you have those skills, then you can actually put your foot forward. Like I would hesitate to go and put my foot forward to sit on Pfizer's board. Apart from having taken the vaccine, I know nothing about Pfizer. I know the stock, but that's about it. I will not be adding value to that board. So you got to look at where do I add value for this company? Because, really, you won't be happy if you're not adding value. And the company won't be happy if you're not adding value. So it has to be a good fit. And you really have to sort of, work towards that early on in your career.
If I can just add something there, Virginia, in terms of the attraction part that the boards can do or not for diverse directors is the messaging you're sending in every opportunity you have to speak about the company. That matters a lot because as a person who is a potential director and is looking, as Priya mentioned, looking at the skill sets or what they can offer to the board, the value in terms of the knowledge, experience. They also looked for boards who they will see that they can succeed and they can do a good job, and that means boards that are actually will welcome that perspective and that expertise, and that's you can see very clearly in the messaging. When the chair of the board or the CEO itself talk about the company and what they do, what they believe in. That's very important because people are hearing, and people can tell from those statements whether they are really, will accept that perspective and expertise or not. And so for me, for instance, I can mention my experience when I decided to go and for the board of PDAC. I wasn't thinking about it, to be honest, Virginia. And first of all, this is a non-for-profit board. This is not a corporate board, but this is a board that is very relevant for the mining sector, as you know, as an association. But anyway, there was nobody tapping my shoulder saying, Rosario, why don't you consider the board? Nobody saying like that. What happened is it was 2020 after what happened with George Floyd in the US. And I remember looking at the papers and seeing so many statements from organizations in the States, particularly and across the globe, against racism in particular, right? Given the situations that happened in the US. And I looked for any mining group or any company that put in a statement about something, and I couldn't find anything. And the first statement I found was the PDAC statement. Under the presidency of Felix Lee, they put a statement against racism. And that was important for me. So that was a message when I saw that, I thought, oh, so they're really serious and they believe, the need to put this out there. And that's when I reached out to the association and learned more about the work and equity, diversity, and inclusion. And for me, that was the traction part to at least open the discussion about what you guys are doing, what is your intent. And then that happened, the elections was a few months after that I decided, yes, I'll put my name and I'll see what happens. But definitely I see an association that is really taking this issue serious, and that's what is attractive for me, right? So just as an example of how the messaging it's important in attraction of potential directors.
What a wonderful story in terms of your experience and what you were looking for, and that messaging, and it's going to tie in very nicely into our next question as well. But it's the message that goes out. And so we've talked a lot about diversity on this panel and our experiences, but I think that diversity is only one piece of the puzzle. There are probably multiple pieces of the puzzle, and we're only dealing with a few of them here. But diversity, and then the other piece of that is inclusion. So you can speak to diversity. You can have messages about diversity and look at that. But then if you have people joining the board and being part of the board, there also has to be that important part of inclusion. How do we make people successful when they join a board? And I think education probably is a big piece of anything. But I'd like to get the views of the panelists here about inclusion and what does that really mean, and what does that look like from a practical standpoint. Who would like to go first? Rosario, can I jump in with you?
Yes, definitely. No, I think that's a very important question, Virginia. And as you said, we have been talking for quite a lot about diversity, but we not talk about inclusion a lot. And I think we should be talking more about inclusion. I just want to quote something that a good friend of mine says. She's Carrie Dominguez. She's the chair of the Center of Inclusive Governance for NACD, which is the ICD in the US. She likes to say diversity without inclusion is just an illusion. And I like it because it's very clear. That means that diversity brings the good mix, right, that we need at the table, the different perspectives and everything. But inclusion is actually making that mix work, actually getting the results, getting the new ideas, the insights, the innovation, the healthy discussions we need to have at the board, right? When people feel comfortable to speak up and say, well, I don't agree with this for these reasons, that healthy discussion that is important for good governance. And that's what we need at the board, right? So that's the inclusion part. And I think there are so many things that you need to look at that. And again, there is no single solution for boards because every board is going to be different, that the culture of every board is different. So you need to think about that as well. But what I like to think is the importance of the chair of the board, really, putting and setting up the tone and the environment for the new diverse directors to feel welcome and comfortable so they can be themselves and speak up when necessary, right? So I think that's very important. And I always like to use this example as like hosting a party, right? You're the host of the party, this very exclusive party, and how you welcome your guests to the party, right? It's like when you have a new director coming in, how is that first interaction is happening, and you need to show, especially if it's a diverse director, you need to be curious about their backgrounds, how they get there, what sort of help they might need, assistance, whatever it is that they need to feel comfortable and welcome. And when you have a meeting, of course, as a chair, especially having that role to make sure that everyone is contributed. And if somebody's silent, ask for ideas, ask for, making sure there's an actual conversation rather to have 2 or 3 who are just dominating the whole thing, right? So I think it's something like that. And that's what I see as a good practice to have for boards to, improve in this inclusion aspect of, and actually getting the result from the diversity they can bring.
Thanks so much, Rosario. Brenda, do you want to?
Yeah, I think Rosario covered it very, very well. The board does need to ensure that they're contributing and benefiting from the new board, especially if there are diverse candidates, their skills and knowledge. So again, chair plays a role, the chairs of the different committees play a role, and then maybe even providing a mentor one-on-one for that person for the first year or two. And even the chair maybe, giving them a phone call, once or twice in their first year. How's it going? What do you need? How do you think, like any questions? And then a strong integration and onboarding, plan with lots of materials to read too as well, because they'll have questions after they read it. And boards are just like any other organization. They have their own culture. The board actually has their own culture, and there are unwritten rules. And, the new people won't know, the new board won't know, member, what those unwritten rules are, that you do things a certain way. So they don't know what they don't know. And I think Rosario used that example as well. So, but anyway, covered it very, very well.
Priya, do you have some thoughts on this?
I think both Brenda and Rosario did a great job. But you're right, the importance of onboarding, right? When you put, set your foot in the door, you need to know not just the board functioning, but also the company too, because, what are the blind spots? What are our strengths and what are our challenges? That may mean you speak with the CEO, CFO, you need to know where the company's at. So that should be a part of the onboarding process versus just sending the policies, these are our mandates of different committees and things like that. And sponsorship, it doesn't have to be necessarily the chair. It could be the chair of the governance committee, or it could be one of the other senior directors. You need that kind of support. And, but again, the other side of that is also the new member who's coming in, should know and be confident that they'll have a voice and have their voice heard. You don't have to be insulting, it's just more sort of a question of how do you work with other people? It's communication skill, right? So, sometimes, you are in board meetings, everybody's talking and some people get drowned out. But even if you get drowned out momentarily, make sure you go back with your point afterwards, and you're heard, that kind of stuff. So I think in just practical aspects, people need to know where they're at, where the company's at, what are the challenges. That's the part of onboarding process. And then having somebody on the board they can go to with any challenges they face.
It sounds challenging. We talk about it here, and all of you have been so involved and so on. But Rosario, go back to the first point that you made about you were looking for a message, and then you reached out and called somebody to have that discussion and think about how you could contribute. And that takes both an educated and a strong personality to do that. And that may be difficult for some people. That may not be their, I guess that's good training for being on a board so that you don't get drowned out, to your point, Priya. But that can be difficult, I think, and challenging for individuals who, again, perhaps don't see themselves well represented on boards. And so when you don't see others that are role models for you, then to be that person, to take that initiative and not see a lot of support must be difficult. I don't know if any of you have your own experiences, Rosario. You obviously shared one, but other experiences that you might have run into in overcoming that hurdle and in being the first one or being the one leading the way.
No, for sure, Virginia, it's not an easy task to do. You have to have a lot of courage and, believe in yourself. And yes, not a lot of people will be, do it immediately. They might take time. But I think you mentioned something very important, to have a good network. And I think for everyone who is thinking about being on the board, it starts with the people who people who you work with, or your colleagues, or somebody that and start learning about, what are the challenges, and feeling more comfortable about having those conversations. So when you get on the board, you actually feel more confident about speaking up and doing this thing. So I think that network really helps. That group of people that you can go into if you have questions, even prior to getting to the board, right? I think that's a very important thing to have, and every professional should have, regardless of not if they're interested or not on boards, but still as a career to growth, you need that support to provide some advice, some ideas. And as Priya mentioned it, I think at one point, the sponsorship is also very important. I think we talk a lot about mentoring in many cases, but when you think about diverse candidates or potential, executives, I think sponsorship is also really important, because sponsoring, as you know, it's more than a mentoring. It's actually opening the door. It's actually talking on behalf of this person when he's not in the room, right? Or she's not in the room, and talk about what this person can do. So I think that's what in many cases is needed for diverse candidates, and being sponsored by somebody who has somebody established, somebody who's already on those networks where they will decide or make the big decisions, to hear from that person, right?
Thanks so much, Rosario. Priya, did you have?
Yeah, I was just thinking, so when you are actually, first of all, before you get on the board, you need to I always make it a habit to speak with every board member, whether it's in a group setting like this, or at least individually. Sometimes it's happened individually, and I actually find it much more valuable to speak with each board member separately, because I get different aspects of the company, from them. And then you're going to make a decision. It's not a one-way street. In other words, it's a decision not just by the company to get you on board. And the fact that they have reached out to you is a great, step. But then you also have to make a decision whether to be on that board or not, right? So, and that's why you need to speak with all the people, because sometimes, we don't get along with everybody in the world. That's a fact, and you got to accept it. And if you don't like certain things about it, maybe you're better off not accepting that particular invitation, and hope for something else. The second thing is, once you're on the board and you're in the boardroom and, like you're attending board meetings, initially your job is to learn what is going on with the company and just the board dynamic, right? I mean, because at that time you don't know a lot about the company really, So 2 years and 1 month, right? So listening more than talking at that time. And then I think another issue, it's also just a question of reasonableness. What is the issue that you're willing to let go, and what is the issue you need addressed? because sometimes it may be so trivial and not important. You don't want to be like saying, oh, I want this addressed. Sometimes you got to let go of certain things. But if it's really important, you also have to stand firm. But that's a question of personality. And then you can only do that after you learn what the company is and what their challenges are, right? So it's just more sort of just a rational aspect to, being on board as a new member, I think. My own experience has been that, I think I have had fairly good board colleagues, actually. They have valued what I have had to say, and I've been sort of chairing audit committees, members of audit committee, composition committee chair, and stuff like that. And they have put me in those positions simply because they have valued my input. And, so it's doable. That's my point, essentially.
Brenda, did you have anything additional that you wanted to add there? No? Okay. So one of our last questions is sort of back to where we started from, and given all your diverse backgrounds, and some of these things have come out in our discussion already, and different perspectives. What is your hope or your expectation? I said for the next 5 years, although that may be in the future when it comes to diversity and inclusion on boards. Do you have a vision? Do you maybe where you think we're going, or what you'd like to see where we're going? Is there somebody who wants to jump in and start on that? Brenda, would you?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to end with today is that with the Canada Business Corporations Act in January of 2020, we now have to disclose diversity at our executive, leaders, the C-suite and on the boards. So I think an absence of diversity is very obvious these days. And I think it can have a negative impact on the corporation for all the reasons that Priya said. And the big thing about Canada, and I'm speaking Canada with diversity, we have huge diversity here in Canada, and that is our strength. And it's one of our greatest assets. And so if it's not at your board table and it's not on your executive, you're missing out. You're truly missing out. So my hope is that, we take advantage of the assets and the strengths that we have.
That's such a great point, Brenda. That's exactly what I'd like to focus on, is that how diverse Canada is. If you think about it, Toronto, like half of the population of Toronto is an immigrant person of color. So how many of those were seen on boards or executive ranks? Not many yet. But my hope is that we do a better work in integrating and moving beyond the gender diversity piece that we talk, and we did have done some efforts and work already there. But beyond that, to integrate this population that we really have here, and it's an advantage for us, because imagine how many people come into Canada as an immigrant, bringing so much knowledge from their home country and are here now in Canada doing and bring a lot of education and experiences too that we can value. So I think it's something we should be taking advantage of, and I hope to see that. And I'm seeing a good trend, as I said before. I'm seeing more Indigenous as well now nominated and sitting on boards, which I think is terrific, especially for the mining sector. The resource sector is so, important piece for us to develop projects to have that perspective. So I'm glad that we're seeing. I hope to see more of that as well. And again, I like to do more and talk less. So we hope to get more advanced in these matters. And next time we actually celebrate the results and the advances we're making in this area.
Thanks so much, Rosario. Priya?
I've got two things that I'd like to see. Often in the mining industry, when you see women I'm going to go to leadership first before I go to boards. they're usually parachuted from other industries, law, finance, accounting, into senior roles. They haven't come up through the mining industry company itself. I would like to see more of nurturance of women within the industry instead of just, parachuting them in. And they usually end up in, mid to large size companies, right? So it would be good to have a pipeline that's defined within the mining industry, advancing women. I'd like to see that because those are the women eventually who can become board members as well. And the second thing I would like to probably I guess I talked a lot. I would like to say that I'm confident that the mining industry is not going to leave women as well as the indigenous peoples and racialized people between a rock and a hard place. They are an extractive industry. They will know to extract value from these group of people, and they will consider both women and the indigenous peoples and racialized people as resources and a great asset to this industry. That is my hope.
These are all wonderful hopes and aspirations for the mining industry, but for industries in general. I think so much of what you've said is applicable not just within the mining industry, but across the board. And I liked, Priya, your rock and a hard place, particularly in the mining context. But that was I thought that was good. So maybe we can. We have about 10 minutes left in our session, and I thought maybe we could just ask a few more questions. One of them comes back. There's a question on our that's come in from one of the people who's watching our sessions, and it's a statement, and it goes back to one of the discussions that we had earlier, one of those controversial subjects. This individual indicated that if there are no targets, it means no change. We're only seeing changes because the proxy firms like ISS and Glass Lewis have added in targets. And so many institutions are requiring targets. And so this individual said, I believe targets should be mandated. And I think we had sort of gone in a different direction in our discussion, that targets are in fact something that perhaps we don't want to see institutionalized, and that we would that we think that having the discussion, having the education, working within the parameters of what we have is a better, not better. It's just a different way of dealing with it. I'm not sure what is better versus not better in this context. But I wondered if any of you have any additional views that you'd like to add in respect of that, given that comment.
I'd just like to add, Virginia, that I don't like that idea to force a business to do something, because I don't think that's something anyone would want. However, if you don't see an organic change and happening, sometimes you question, is it necessary maybe to implement those? And I understand what this person is coming from, because you get frustrated at the pace of change, and sometimes those requirements will really force some bigger changes, right? So I think that's why what I mentioned initially in my comments is I don't like the idea of quotas necessarily, but I think when you think about any business issue, you have to have metrics and also follow that. Otherwise, you don't know where you stand and where you want to get or how to get there. So I think that's very important. So regardless of whether there are quotas or not legislated, I think every company should put their own targets and look at that and follow the metrics and see how they advance. as any other business issue, because for any business matter, you do that, right? You follow that and make it happen. And accountability is another very important piece of that. So who is going to be accountable for what? And I think we have that comment from Brenda as well about compensation tied to getting some of those targets. So I think that's also very important to look at, because you want to get things done, you measure them and you make people accountable for, right?
I think that's so true. And compensation, as you say, is a key metric in that.
Yeah.
Priya, did you have something else that you?
I do. I think I do. I'm happy to see ISS and Glass Lewis actually taking the leads on this, because money talks. ISS and Glass Lewis is go to talk to investors, and I started my discussion with capital. If you're not going to make the change, so you don't need necessarily regulators to come in and do the quota, mandated quotas. Money can actually take care of it. The capital providers can take care of this issue, and they are actually on that path. And companies know that very well, that unless they actually, do have a more modern, innovative board, they're not going to have access to money. So I think even without, I think I would focus on the money aspect, the capital providers versus the regulators, because once you have the regulators, you don't know where it goes and how actually it's implemented and things like that. It is happening already with just the pressure, the ESG type of pressure, institutional investor type of pressure. It's happening. I gave you the numbers, right? From 10% to 23%, 7% to 19%. And and there are global institutions like Catalyst asking for 33%, and then, they will, they are also talking to institutions, because a lot of their supporters, sponsors, are institutional money. So I think just go to the money, and money talks very convincingly.
It all leads back to the money.
Yeah.
We've had some other questions, but we've answered them within our discussion today, and we're just coming up on the hour, and so I would just like to take a moment to thank Rosario, Brenda, and Priya for your very interesting insights, your discussion on this topic, your wealth of knowledge. I would be very privileged to sit on a board with any of you. I think it's you all bring such great insight and information to this topic. So thank you for taking the time to be here today and for sharing your views and thoughts with our audience. And I would also like to mention that our next session will be the shift to electronic vehicles and what it means for Canadian mining and our automotive sector, taking place on June 6th, beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can sign up for any one of our upcoming webinars at Fasken Institute section at fasken.com. And we hope you can join us. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next seminar.